Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited because I have Kirk Dennison on the line. Say hello, Kirk.
Hey Ed.
Howdy, sir. Rocking the phone, so it's a little bit shaky, but it'll be all right. We'll take what we can get. And if you don't know, Kirk is the owner of Piecekeeper Games, did Flag Dash, Gearworks, if I got that right, is launching on Kickstarter tomorrow. So tons of things going on, but there's actually a lot of cool stuff, a scrappy stuff that Kirk's been doing that I'm super interested in talking about. But to kick it off, Kirk, could you give us, I always like to start with that origin story bit. Can you sort of take us through what you were doing and how you sort of got into making games, like just lead up to Flag Dash and that sort of approach?
Sure. I've been a gamer for most of my life. I think that's a pretty common story for most board game creators. And then one day I just decided I was going to make a game. Sounds like a common story. I just popped in my head.
I'm going to
I
do
don't
it.
know of any good. I don't know of any good capture the flag games, so I'm just going to make one. I didn't know what that meant. I just started making it. I made the first prototype within 15 minutes of thinking of the idea. I just grabbed some pieces off my shelf and a blockus board. And then on a car ride to Milwaukee, my wife was driving. I started playtesting it in my lap.
Awesome. And I dare we say the original item meeples, right? You had meeples with
Yes,
hands that got things put in them before they were cool, right?
before they were cool. Yeah, I mean, I had a few challenges getting them made correctly, but they were fun to make.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually Flag Dash was that first game. That's how we got to know each other because, like, many early creators, you reached out to, my channel to have a review, which is cool and it looked cool. And I liked what you were doing, sort of that, tight tactical capture the flag game, right? And it's true. There really haven't been that many games that have been capture the flag games. And it was around the same time Wizard Dodgeball was out. So a couple of these other
Right.
little sort of side A, B, fun little games. And so you worked it through, you did the meeples, and then you launched it on Kickstarter, right?
Right.
And so and reasonably successful, right? I don't think it was a killer campaign, but enough for you guys to get started, right?
Yeah, we raised just under 15,000. I'm going to put a blog post up about it pretty soon, but for those interested, what that related to was after everything was said and done, $1,500 profit to us for all of our many hours. So
Well,
not crazy amount of money, but that's what it boils down to.
better than the money I lost on liftoff. So trust me there. But so the first thing I wanted to talk to you about that's on my list is because I remember talking to you about this. It was probably at BGCon maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Um, First thing was you were we're going to call stores and we're going to get on the phone and like sort of reach out and build these relationships on a case by case basis. Can you just, because a lot of people have that conversation, they say, do I need a distributor? Am I going to use Aldo and Impressions? How am I going to get to retail? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I distinctly remember the conversation with you. Like, no, we're like calling every store and selling directly. What is that like?
Yeah.
Like, so, take us through that whole process.
Well, the good thing about it is if you make any sales call, you have plenty more opportunities to right the ship. Whereas with the big guys, if you bomb it, then you have only a few more opportunities. So I used to do sales back in high school and college. I don't do sales for a day job, but so I have that background, and it's just cold calling. There are some stores that I would look for more friendly leads. I'd try to figure out if any of my friends in other states went to game shops, and I'd have them drop a line, and it's a little bit easier to get in contact with the store owner if someone refers you in. But generally, it was just pounding the pavement of look up stores on Google, look at the reviews. If the store had generally pretty good reviews and a decent quantity of them, then I would jot them down as a store I'd like to call. And then I'd just start making phone calls around lunch hour. I generally set aside about 40 minutes each lunch for a period of 3 or 4 weeks, and I'd start making phone calls and then keeping notes on when to follow up. Generally, you don't get a hold of them right away, so you're just needing to keep track of notes of when's a good time to call them. They all have different off days because they're open on the weekends, so you might call on a Tuesday and that's their day off and call back next week.
And so let's really just, again, because I really think it's an approach that a number of Kickstarter creators consider, and some have been more successful than others. I remember when I was, early on, I was an intern at Atari, or GT Interactive, before Atari acquired them, and I was a marketing intern, and one of my assignments was find every mom-and-pop video game shop in the United States and ask them if they want our free promo pack. And it was literally like, here's a map of the United States. And this was pretty early, so it wasn't like, I was looking at phone directories for these different states and just looking up any game not video game companies, and then having those phone calls, right? So certainly being organized, having notes, not really systematically approaching it and walking through it. But then once you got into the conversation, how did you introduce yourself? Like, take us through a call.
Sure. So I actually made a script for it.
Subconsciously
at first, but then I started getting my wife involved, and she's really helpful, but she also would prefer that I give her the instructions. So I wrote up a script one day and realized it helped me with my sales pitch too, so rather than relying on my memory. So generally what I would do is lead in with why their store intrigued me. So I would say something about the reviews that I read. Usually I would look for common themes in the reviews. So this is no different than like a job application. I think it's generally in your best interest to know more about who you're calling. If you're trying to establish a relationship, don't just call and know nothing about who you're talking to. So I would quote things that their customers said to them and say, you know what, I called you because it sounds like your customers really appreciate your customer service, or they think that you've got a great play space.
It's a beautiful day there in Wisconsin, and I know it's raining, but it's still nice out in October, right? Like, go on.
Right. But I had most of the people that picked up, they'd say thank you when I give them a compliment. And I think that opens up a little more of an opportunity to have a productive conversation. And then I would just introduce myself and say we have a game that's of interest to some other stores and figured you might want to hear about it. And I would ask them if they would like to hear more about the game, or if they'd rather, or actually I didn't even give them another option. I said, would you like to hear about the game? And most of them said yes. A couple of them said no. But almost all said yes. And then I gave them the brief elevator pitch in maybe 2 sentences, and then asked if they wanted a little more information, and they would either tell me politely no, or we'd have a more productive conversation after that. So the conversation would generally take less than 2 minutes, and I would have a pretty good feel of whether they were even interested in talking to me further.
Right. Well, and so go ahead.
This is assuming I'm talking to the store owner or the manager, whoever's buying. Generally, you're first talking to just whoever's working there, and you're going to have to call back until you find the right time to call them.
Right, and get the name of the person who runs the store and that kind of thing. So, it's establishing a personal connection, right? Understanding the store, giving them a compliment, setting up a sort of sense of value. Other stores have been picking it up, some sort of, this is something of interest. And then a quick pitch, right? And so once you pitched it to them, was it really like, hey, we do singles, we do sets of 6? Like, how did you then go into the sale, and then what happened? Did you ship it to them? Could you take us through that too?
Sure. What we did, based on the size and weight of the game and what I figured out our discounted shipping rates with FedEx, is that we could afford to do 4 units with free shipping as a minimum. And so what we typically did was we let that we do free shipping on orders of 4 units or more. And sometimes stores would actually beat us to the punch of that, and they would say, well, will you throw in a demo copy if I order a certain number of copies? And so sometimes, even though I would have done 4 free shipping, sometimes stores would just sign themselves up for, we usually buy 6 copies of a game and get a free demo and free shipping. Does that work for you? And I said, sure. So my terms were a little different from store to store, but my basic terms were buy 4, get free shipping. And
4 is a real purchase, right? A lot of people forget that your typical retail store, if it's not a game they know is going to sell, they normally might pick up 1 or 2 copies. Like 4 is not insignificant. 6 or 8 is like, no, we're putting a lot on the shelf. So to sell 4 is getting them to buy in with a demo or with free shipping is a big deal.
Right. In retrospect, I probably would have pushed more to make sure almost every single store had a demo copy, because we probably only had a third of the stores have demo copies, and the sales numbers were significantly better at the stores who picked up a demo copy.
Right, for sure. I remember Renegade was doing a promotion recently where they were not only giving a demo copy, but they were giving a demo table, right? Like it was like a full-on Renegade demo table. It was good. And so then they order and you ship. Did you do any sort of customer follow-up and engagement afterwards, or did they sort of fall off a cliff for you?
I was able to follow up with the vast majority of the stores once, maybe even twice. What I usually followed up was to send them a set of demo rules. We put together just a front back page that helped their employees get the game set up with a shortened version of the game that would be of interest to run a 10-minute demo of the game to sell it rather than running the full 30-minute thing. So that was a reasonable opportunity for me to reach back out to them again. So I would say, if you're interested, I'd be happy to email you a PDF of the demo rules. And no one said no. They were all interested in that. And then they would usually respond to the email and thank me for sending that over. And then we also sold out of the first print run. So when we were getting low in stock, I was following up with the stores to see if they wanted to place any other orders for the holidays and things like that. So I was able to have some good follow-ups. And then after we sold out and the game came back into stock, we were able to follow up with them as well and direct them to whether they wanted to order through UltraPro or not.
Now, and I know, and I actually want to get into the UltraPro bit, and I know you weren't like tracking SQLs and MQLs and doing that whole thing, but generally speaking, I've been on the sales side too, but if you looked at that and you said, you know what, UltraPro didn't happen, that opportunity didn't come up, do you think you could have continued to build and grow and actually like accomplish the direct sales to stores model, or were you sort of at a point where you're like, well, we sold stuff, but this is way too much work for what was your takeaway before you went on with UltraPro, which was a big deal? What was your takeaway from that effort?
I think the payoff is worth it. It's just challenging to figure out the right time of day to call. When you're working a day job like I was, basically I had time before work, during lunch, or after work to call, with limited exceptions. And before work, game stores are never open. During lunchtime, your stores, depending on the time zone, might just be opening. They might be at lunch. And then if you're calling after work, you might be catching the owner when they've already left. So you have a really small time period. So if I was working an alternate work schedule, maybe I started work at 6 and finished at 2 or 3, I'd say, or if that's your schedule, I'd say go for it. Just call people for an hour and a half after you're done with work, and you'll probably be pretty successful with it. But it absorbs all your lunch times for weeks on end.
Months. and
so
good.
So I was glad to get my lunches back when I stopped doing that.
Yeah. And have you kept your I don't know what you'd call it, like, what are those things? Rolodex? Go really dated. Have you kept your contact list?
Yeah, I have that it's in Excel, but sure. So most of the stores are pretty favorable towards us. There were a couple of them that they didn't sell it as well, and they said they wouldn't want to buy from us again, and that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so that was like first thing I want to talk to you about. Next thing I want to talk to you about is you had this sort of stunning BGCon / UltraPro thing that went down where you were able to, and I don't know the order in which everything happened, but the game was the number one or top list of BGG hot list or whatever it was on Board Game Geek, and from that event, and then if I recall the story, and you should correct me, UltraPro saw that, or you had already been talking to them, and then they saw that afterwards, and it would really seal the deal. Can you take us through that to the extent you're comfortable, and in particular, sort of like how you got this? I actually like Flag Dash, but it's this relatively obscure little game, right? How you made that moment happen.
Sure. I did want to just follow up on one basic thing in case people are curious. We had over a 50% conversion rate on stores that we contacted to sell. So hey man, almost any salesperson would take that number. Yeah. So there is that's something for people to keep in mind. But to your question about BGCon, we went into the convention with maybe 60 copies to our name. We'd sold through the majority of our first print run. We only sold 375, 400 through Kickstarter and pre-orders. And then between retailers, we sold another 500 copies, 500 plus copies of the game.
When you were selling to retailers, you were selling at 50% MSRP, right?
Correct. With a couple exceptions to Cool Stuff and Miniature Market.
Sure.
They bought a large quantity and they got a slightly higher discount. So we had a very small number of copies going into BGCon. It wasn't by design that we were trying to limit our supply going into the convention. We were just selling well into retail stores, and we had just a small number of cases left. And on a optimistic side, I figured maybe we could sell it at BGCon. I wasn't confident we would. If we didn't, I figured we'd be able to sell out by the holidays with retailers placing reorders. So we went to the show. We shared a booth with someone, Bob's Weekend Wonders, and we just started demoing the game like crazy. It can set up in a pretty small space, so my wife and I were alternatingly just running demos. And with our demo scenario, we were running 4 to 5 demos an hour, so we were able to really churn people through it, and we sold almost 50 copies of the game. And between other online orders while we were at the convention, we sold out there. And one thing we started doing on near the end of day one was, I figure you have one opportunity to make a push for something with a customer after an interaction. You can either strongly push for the sale, you could ask them to sign up for your email list, you could ask them to go vote for something, or maybe go to a website for something. But you generally can't do more than one because people are going to move on to something else. And I tried doing different things on day one. I started pushing harder for the sale, or I started asking for email list. And then I decided to switch gears near the end of the first day and push for the BGCon buzz list. And so what I did is we just had our phone there, and there was just a quick portal. And because it's BGCon, everyone has their user voting ID on them. So after they demoed, I said, hey, if you found the game of interest and you wanted to vote for us in the game buzz, then if you want to do it right now, that'd be awesome. And many people said yes. It was fairly easy. We sacrificed the opportunity to follow up with those customers through email lists. We would have had a much lower conversion ratio, but as a result, we vaulted to the top of the Geek Buzz and never looked back. And so I think that was a worthwhile decision, how it paid off.
And for those who don't know, I mean, I can think of a lot of different smaller companies that have found success doing some version of that, whether it's log in right here, or hey, the sign up booths across walk down the
Right.
down the hall. But that hot list not only shows at the con, it's on the front page of BGG, like almost permanently. Like it sits there the entire convention, and like
Right.
it depends on the con, but like a week after, 2 weeks after, some of them it's been like a month. You're like, are they going to take that down? And they don't reorder it once it's set. So being even, and probably doesn't even matter if you're number one, but being in the visible, being in the top 10 is huge exposure, because it's not even the sort of thing on the left where they're all moving around. It's this fixed front page thing. Like right now, I don't know if I forget what happens if I swipe over. I won't swipe over, but the Essen one is up on
Still up there.
right now from that convention, and it's a really big deal. So if you have a lot of playtests going on and you're moving people through and you're at a convention that has that kind of list, it certainly is an option, as you put it, to say, do I push hard for the sale, or am I going to try to just get the visibility? Because very few things, that is almost, you can't buy that, right? That's you have to earn it and convince people and cajole and do that whole thing. But so then how did that turn into the UltraPro deal? Had you spoken to them at all at that point, or was it really after that?
No, I'd never spoken to anyone from their company before. We were just pounding the pavement the whole show, and had sold out in the morning of Sunday, and then for most of the rest of the day we just demoed to people. We had no game to sell, but people still wanted to come and learn about the game. And 5 minutes after the booth or the show floor closed, then Sean Leshgary from UltraPro came up and was pretty interested in the game, and apparently had been watching us from afar during the convention, and let us know quickly that he was very interested in seeing if they could partner with us or license the game. And 2 weeks later, I wasn't even prior to this thinking that anyone would want the game. We were just going to reprint it ourselves, but then they'd signed the deal to license the game, and then they re-released it in May. So only 6 months after they licensed it, then they did a much larger printing of the game.
And I could be mistaken, but that was sort of the beginning of their now bigger push into the sort of board gaming space. Some of it's sport oriented, some of it isn't, but you know, moving out of just their sort of bread and butter and driving into just a variety of games. And even at Gen Con now, their sort of presence this last year has grown significantly, at least in sort of the broader board game space.
Yes, they have quite a few games they're releasing. They acquired a number of companies, or maybe the technical term is that they have they license a bunch of games. They have all the Ascension product line and other Stone Blade games, Jolly Roger, Playroom Entertainment, and then a number of, I guess you'd call them one-offs that included me, that they just released it under their own brand. Right.
Okay, so that sort of catapulted that product forward. I mean, presumably bigger run, and you're starting to get more of that. Turns into more of your typical royalty-like experience. You're not running sales anymore. You're just saying thank you very much. I'll take whatever percentage. I don't need to know. And clearly now your Gearworks is coming out, and there hasn't been a game between those two, right? Or has there?
No, there hasn't. So we delivered our first Kickstarter last July. Then Gen Con happened in August. We sold out by the end of the year. Then we spent most of the first quarter of this year trying to figure out our next project, and then everything came at once in March. I came up with the Gearworks design, and then we signed a couple other games from other designers, and we've been working on those since then.
Right, and so this brings me to the next thing I want to talk about. It's all over the place, but so one Gearworks we played at, I believe, Gen Con. It was coming along, and so it's been cool to see it progressing. I haven't played the latest, but I got a pretty cool version of it. But you sort of then do what I think a number of small, scrappy creators do that find themselves sort of thrust into the space, trying to look for different opportunities, following the wherever the ball goes. You start doing some different things that are really interesting. One is you start effectively picking up other picking up other games to publish, right? And presumably do some development and bring it and do the Kickstarter and roll it through. Was that something you always intended to do, or how did that opportunity come? The first one, how did you sort of take on that?
Great question. I don't fancy myself as having all the best ideas, but when I see an idea that I like, I get really excited about it. So I was generally open to signing people's games even since late last year, and I've probably had submissions of over 50, 60 games that I look through. And
do you have
some
of them
website
they go submit and you take a look?
We did, and we went to some different proto-spiels and other, even at BGCon, people pitched us games. At Origins, people pitched us games. I probably evaluated half dozen prototypes, and the first one that we signed was actually a game I told myself I wasn't going to sign because it was longer than the games I thought I would publish, but I just couldn't stop playing the game and decided I'd publish it.
And is this how do you pronounce the name of this one?
Rorick, Dawn of Kiev.
Yeah, and that one's I've seen it open and laid out, and it's not a 2-minute game. But also that's the one with the incredible box art, right? Like the
really
stellar, epic. Yeah. I just saw it all laid out, and I was like, hey, let's look at this Gearworks game. But it looks super cool. Again, I don't know anything about it, and so that Gearworks is now. When is that one coming through?
We'll launch tomorrow, and then Kickstarter will run through December 5th. We'll deliver by June next year.
No, I mean Rorick. When's Rorick happening?
Oh, Rorick coming through. That'll be a Q2 Kickstarter next year. So it'll probably be live either right before, right after Origins time frame.
And do you expect to be doing a combination of your own designs and published designs? Are you shifting? Are you alternating? Do you have a sense of that?
I think I'll just go with whatever's ready. So Gearworks was kind of a fluke. I was trying to design some other games that had fun themes, but the game was bad. And I just lucked into it. The basics of the game were hashed out in 5 minutes and stuck with it. And most of the game was just refining the outliers and making the game integrated into a theme. So flash in a pan.
Yeah. A good word other than fluke is serendipitous, right? Like it was.
Oh, that's a good word.
Yeah, or lightning in a bottle, or even flash in the pen isn't as good as lightning in a bottle.
No.
That's Herbaceous was that. My largest game was this out of the blue moment of seeing fantastic art from Beth, being like in general chats with Steve and sort of pulling everything together, and that was a very the game cycle was a quarter of everything else that I was doing, right? And it just sort of fell in, and it was, again, it's been, Pencil First's most successful game to date, albeit still pretty small. Okay, so there's the sort of co-publishing thing. Then you're doing this other weird thing, and this is sort of, it's just interesting, right? Because you're at the convention, you're like, I got these trains and these lightning bolts. And so
Oh, yeah.
you started coming up with designs and then manufacturing them and then also using the Game Crafter. Can you talk about that piece of it? Just in sort of random board game thing you were doing?
Yeah, that's... I like to do lots of random things, and it's showing itself in board games that I just figure I'm just going to do this, and it's pretty easy to just do things in the board game space. So I decided I was going to manufacture a run of wooden lightning bolts. We made some of those in our deluxe version of Flag Dash. Customers seemed to like those and often asked us if they could buy just the lightning bolts for King of Tokyo upgrades. The first 3 or 4 people that asked us about that, I politely told them no, because I didn't want to just bust open our expansion packs. But when enough people started asking me, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just make these because people want them. Very simple lightning bolts, but I looked at it. No offense to what's out there, but there wasn't a very
they're
simple.
Great. They're great little lightning bolts. Meeple Source has the meeples, but they don't got anything on your little lightning bolts, man.
Their lightning bolts are busier and they look like a mushroom cloud, and that might fit in a certain field, but these are just really simple and easy to use for counters and all sorts of games. So we made a ton of these lightning bolts, but at the same time while I was going to do this, I just reached out to JT at Game Crafter and said, would you guys want to buy some of these? And he said, well, sure. So I knew then that I would have a larger order with them to sell, so you can prototype with these in your game, 8 different colors of lightning bolts there. And then I wanted to print a bunch for myself just because I like them and I like to always play with them and just give them out to friends and whatnot. But I realized that maybe I should do something more with this and ask JT what else they might like. And he said, well, people ask for wooden trains. We don't have any. So I made a 2D image of a train and realized that it was big enough that I could also make it a promo bit. So I could put our logo on it and hand it out at conventions. Long story short, with the pricing of it, it ended up being that instead of buying custom chess X dice, which I did for Gen Con giveaways our first year, by printing these trains, I could give away, they were something like 5 or 6 times cheaper to manufacture them with screen printing on them to hand out, and still have thousands of extra non-screen printed to sell of lightning bolts and trains. And it cost me hundreds of dollars less than buying the dice did. So it was a little bit of legwork, but it wasn't very hard. They just air shipped them to my door, and then I have just tons of wooden trains and lightning bolts.
No, well, and why stop there? But what when the Game Crafter picks them up, do they buy them in bulk from you, or do you is it on a per sale basis and it's like a commission, or how does that work?
They buy them in bulk. They'll buy a minimum of whatever they'd like in different colors. They generally would prefer to get the full scale of 8 colors that they provide, so that way if you're designing a game with these 4 player colors, you'll have access to those colors. So if you're a creator and you have wooden bits in a game, there's an open invitation from Game Crafter to solicit selling the pieces to them. I believe Jamie Stegmeyer has done this with some of the Scythe components, and I'm not sure who else has done it. James Matthew has done it with some of the
and actually
Manhattan Project series.
Starting at Gen Con, they are now doing the candy store bit thing, which, if I understand correctly, was just a huge success for them at the show.
Yes.
So they're gonna be the next bit maker.
But they don't make them; they just buy them. So if you are already in with
Sure.
manufacturers, they'd be happy to talk to you.
Right. And again, it's a little bit different than the sort of Meeple source approach, which is they're like, hey, let's just take Pandemic or a popular game, let's do a variant set and leverage the sort of brand and IP, right?
Right.
Okay, so got a little bit more time here. I want to talk about the next crazy, wacky thing you're doing. So, so you're moving through this process as a creator. You're doing all these little things, and so I guess at some point you're like, I need a backer kit solution, but not one that's expensive or Jetbacker. What's the name of your in development software?
It's called Jetbacker. So we have
Jetbacker.
a new pledge manager we're going to launch soon.
And so what, just in terms of, hey, let's take on pledge managers. There's, where did that stem from?
Yeah, this is just another little wrinkle that I
Keep it complicated, right?
Right. Why make it simple when you can develop multiple games at once and do side hobbies to your hobby job? My brother is my web
I'm doing a
developer.
Q&A right now, right?
Right.
Well, go on.
My brother is my web developer, and I never feel that I have enough income to justify giving him exorbitant amounts of money, and I believe he's okay with the amount that I'm paying him for things. So I just kind of hatched an idea that if I'm already asking him to do all these different things to help me out, which the origin of this was I didn't want to just go pay for a pledge manager solution, because worst case is I can do what you do, which is just keep track of it in Excel. I assume that's what you do, and just
Maybe.
keep track of
You
orders.
don't know. Yes, I use Excel. I have a nice Excel.
That's good. So I did that for Flag Dash, and I work in Excel a lot with my day job, so it's not a problem for me. I haven't had a major campaign I had to do that with yet, but I know that when you have 10,000 backers, that's not a very good option. But I figured I'd just or rather have my brother make one, and I do the QA and I do the business development. But I figured if I could just leverage that platform and we could sell it as a service to other creators, then the income that we would make from that, I can just float to him as extra income for his efforts on web development. And if we make a little bit of money with it, well, great. He's got some extra cash in his pocket for helping me out with things. If we more than that, well, maybe I'll take a little bit of it, but we'll see if it gets to that point first.
Yeah, well, so when you're looking at a pledge manager, let's take it as you're sort of saying, hey, really, I'm solving my own problem, and hey, perhaps if this helps other people, that awesome. But like when you think about it, like what are the key things that you want from a pledge manager, and what are the things that you don't think are really that worthwhile?
Sure, I think the biggest thing is price. Some of the pricing structures of other pledge managers isn't readily apparent to creators. Now, once you've used them once, it's not that hard to understand what you're doing. You're either paying a percentage of your Kickstarter and or a percentage of the funds raised on the platform. You can change the percentages between this or that. Some of them also just charge you a flat rate per backer that you have, because you're managing address updates even if they don't buy anything. And then some of the other ones just have monthly fees that you pay for using the services. And I believe there might be some that even have just straight up minimums that apply. So generally, I think that creators would prefer a no-frills pledge manager where there's no hidden pricing and it's very easy to figure out what the cost is. When I've gone to several of the other websites, now I should say their UIs look great. And
and they're getting better.
And they work really well. But as far as pricing goes, as a creator, when I've scouted out some of the other services, it's not always readily apparent for me to quickly figure out how much it's going to cost me. So anytime math takes more than a few moments to figure out, I think people start to yawn about it. So we're just going to do a flat percentage on all transactions, no minimums, no other hidden fees. Just make it extremely simple. That's the biggest thing. Beyond that, I think that you want to make it very easy to direct new people that didn't back the Kickstarter, and where to direct existing people there. And people are going to forget their passwords or forget the link and everything, so that you don't want to worry with it as a creator. You just want a fairly intuitive website, so when you show up, the creator has to do next to nothing, and it's very easy for the backers to update their address, because they're going to update their addresses all the way until you ship.
Sure. Cool. And so there's that initiative, and maybe that'll come together, maybe it won't. But it's just, to me, it's an example of, as I've said the word Scrappy a bunch of times, but this sort of, hey, there's this interesting opportunity here. How do we take this on? How can I call every store in the United States? How am I going to do this? If I'm not mistaken, you've also sort of been now that there's this collaborator field on Kickstarters, have also helped some Kickstarter creators sort of manage just the onslaught of comments and backers and just the workload of running a live campaign.
Yes, Keith Mateka is a good friend. He lives pretty close to me in Madison, Wisconsin. We play test each week, and I sensed that he might need some help with his last role-player campaign before it took off.
That was a beast.
It was. I don't remember what he thought it would hit, but it did extremely well, and I think he was glad to have me on board to help him with managing the community and helping him think big picture and stay focused on what was important.
Yeah. Somebody to be like, you don't always have to do what every backer says, right? Like,
right.
Cool, man. Well, and so as you've been rolling around, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you're still working full time, right?
Yes.
And so it's still hobby, right? It's different versions of hobby. You're at cons. You're often with your family, right? You're all running around and doing things. Are you sort of looking for that point when you see yourself flipping over, or is it really just you're just having fun, exploring, trying out different things, and it's more about the sort of experience of it than it is necessarily like making it the center of your day to day?
It's a great question. I think about this most days now. I'm spending quite a few hours doing this hobby job stuff, so it's worth evaluating. I probably do 30 hours a week of this stuff on top of my day job. At this point, I've been doing it for a number of months at this pace. So I wake up at 4 a.m. every day, work for 3.5 hours, go to the office, work a little bit over lunch, work a little bit after work, rinse and repeat. It's a lot. So I am positioning myself so that we could maybe transition if this in the next Kickstarter take off. And if it doesn't, then I'll reevaluate and probably scale back. Not to say I wouldn't take a shot again at some point, but I don't think the pace I'm going at is reasonable in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have those life evaluations along the way, right? You always got to sort of say, what's happening right now? Is right now working? Is right now not working? Right. But awesome, man. I think you're such a good example of that sort of what it's still like to sort of be independent and trying to figure things out and taking on new opportunities. Certainly, I hope Gear Works is a great campaign for you guys. A quick question, are you doing a short campaign or a long campaign? Where are you in the 2, 3, 4 week scale?
I believe it's 22 days. So
3 weeks. A little less than 3.
So yeah.
Not
a little
not
more technically, but
yes, a little more than 3. Look at that.
Our last campaign was 30 days, so I'll be glad to have a week less of that stress.
Man, I've done a 2-week campaign, and I'm like, man, it'd be great if it was 1 week. But cool. And yeah, so good luck, and very curious to see. Certainly, let us know if Jetbacker becomes a thing, and so if I go to GameCrafter right now and I look at their little bits, I or anyone else listening will go see the lightning bolts we're talking about here, right?
And the wooden trains.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, thanks for joining, and thanks everyone for watching. Hope it was as interesting as it was to me. I always say that, but I mean it. And subscribe, share, and play some great games. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.